People coming in right now. Welcome, thank you for coming. So we'll kind of do a slow start. My name is Kalen, I'm a facilitator. And in just a second, please let me tell you about the purpose of this meeting and what is planned in terms of information and what we're thinking for tonight and where this fits in the process. But before we do that, why don't we just introduce ourselves, certainly the project team, and then it's a small group, as you like, please let us know who you are and where you come from. I'm Kalen, I'm a facilitator, and right now, I live at Lake Tahoe for right now, and came down to this very special place, and I'm pleased to be here. Here's some of your project team.
Hi folks, I'm Frank Delling, I'm the project manager.
Liza Walker, Senior Environmental Planner.
I'm Adam Wagswell, I'm the project manager for the consulting firm for Caltrans, and I'm with ICF is the name of the firm.
And I don't mean to put anybody on the spot, but as you like, please let us know who you are.
I'm Peggy Zimmerman. I'm one of the owners of Salmon Creek Property. And I'm Janet Pauley. I'm also one of the owners of Salmon Creek.
I'm Wally Zimmerman. I'm married to her.
Mario Real, local resident of DK Native Plant Society.
Thanks, Marty. Please, sir.
Oh, Maynard Kaminsky, videotaper.
Good man.
Michael Garrison, a resident of Albion.
I'm bouncing around, please.
From here in Albion.
Hi.
I'm Dave Wiley, and I live down the street, and I'm Friends of Salmon Creek.
Thank you.
Genevieve Winsler, and we live on Spring Grove Road with my husband.
Welcome. Thank you for coming. Sir.
Terry Searles, Albion.
Ted Williams, Fire Chief in Albion, candidate for Supervisor.
I'm Marie Weibel, Albion Bridge Stewards. I live in Albion.
Louise Mariana, I live in Albion.
Richard Mullen, Deputy District Director, Caltrans.
I'm Eric Lund, project engineer for Salmon Creek Bridge.
Hi, I'm Stephanie Lister. I'm with the consulting firm ICF.
I'm Sandra Roses, I'm the office chief over the environmental program here in District 1.
Yeah, sorry.
I'm Karen Lillienbecker, I work with Sandra at ICF, not with Sandra, with Stephanie at ICF.
Hi, I'm Corey Reed. I'm from Caltrans. I'm the Public Information Officer.
Thank you again for coming. So this meeting is about the Salmon Creek Bridge. And if you do something big enough in this state, the California Environmental Quality Act says that you need to study a range of alternatives, their environmental impacts, explain those impacts to the public, select one, and explain yourself, how you got that decision. And the first stage of that is scoping, whereby the lead agency, in this case Caltrans, is on the hook to ask you early in the process a couple of things. What do you want to see in terms of this process? And what do you want to see in terms of substance or the outcome? And so that's why we're here, to talk about Salmon Creek in this environmental review. And so for tonight, this is the first of two meetings as a part of this scoping phase. We're going to have one tonight, and we're going to have one next week on the 20th. Here again, same format, same presentation, just another opportunity to have another conversation. As well, during this scoping phase, and this will be the first of several times tonight that I and probably others remind you, lots of different ways that Caltrans actually is seeking your input during the scoping phase. Again, either on the process, the analysis itself, or the stuff, the bridge, the outcome. So tonight, we'll hear your comments, and after a presentation, almost the whole meeting is dedicated to hearing from you and what you want to hear. So we'll be taking notes both carefully and maybe on the walls too. Also, there are comment forms where in the back you can write a specific comment form as much as you want on that piece of paper. And then until October 5th, Caltrans is interested in hearing from you in any other way with a more detailed comment response or materials that you would like them to review. And where to send that is included in this presentation, and it's also on those comment forms and all of that stuff. But tonight is an opportunity where Caltrans is actually here to listen to you about these things. And so, therefore, in terms of the flow of this evening, I want to do a brief presentation on CEQA, California Environmental Quality Act, what an EIR is, and what kind of decision-making and analysis goes on in an EIR. including a couple of comments about when you get to comment during that process. Then, stepping away from the general or the policy, a look at this project, the Salmon Creek Bridge project, and what its considerations are, what the timeline will be, and what the team now sees as the scope and the range of the direction of the study and the analysis. That's mostly what I wanted to say. We know that there are a lot of active discussions going on about the Albion Bridge and about other stuff going on in the region. Tonight this meeting is about Salmon Creek. You came here and it's your prerogative as to what you want to speak about. This team wants to make sure that they at least get asking questions about Salmon Creek Bridge because they're required to during this phase, during scoping and CEQA. And you say what you want to focus on, and this team is as long as we don't sacrifice that opportunity to hear what we need to hear about Salmon Creek, this team is also ready to hear what you have to say. I actually, despite being a facilitator, don't love being facilitated, so I'm often really casual about ground rules, and I have a couple here. Here's the meeting purpose. I didn't stick to the presentation either, but let me do so since we made one and since you've got it in your packet. Again, we're here to talk about the Salmon Creek Bridge Replacement Project and the environmental study that will go along with it. Want to present the requirements of the environmental document, explain how alternatives are created and analyzed, and collect your comment on the scope of the study. So here are some possible ground rules, but I also really like the ones that were actually already here on the wall for the school. Be safe, be respectful, and be responsible. I'm not actually worried about being safe. I mean, I am in general, but I don't feel any danger. In terms of being respectful, I think that's pretty clear, how we treat each other, the golden rule. And in terms of responsible, this is how I see our roles this evening. I think Caltrans is on the hook to listen. I think that's how they're responsible, is to listen to you about the scope of this study and what you want included in this analysis. I didn't say it yet, but I do want to say the team isn't ready to answer a lot of the substantive questions about the outcome of the bridge because the analysis hasn't been done yet. It's not even appropriate to do so at this stage. But they are interested in what your comments and questions are, what you want them to consider as they construct a range of alternatives and analyze them. So I think that's Caltrans' job in terms of being responsible. I think for the rest of us in the meeting, being responsible means working as hard as you can to communicate what is most important to you to Caltrans. If that comes with a motion because you really care about this, that's fine. I think the best advice comes when we're hard on problems and easy on people. But there's nothing wrong with being passionate about this stuff and making it clear that you want something heard. That's fine. Let's just be respectful of people and be really specific and hard on the problems because it matters. Does that sound like a good enough meeting? So, sorry, last part. 20 minutes maybe, a little over 20 minutes of a presentation talking about both CEQA and the Salmon Creek Bridge project, maybe getting close to a half hour. I just had one of the speakers invite and say, you don't have to wait all the way through the presentation if there's something that you want to say as we go. And then after that, the rest of the meeting is dedicated to hearing your comments and questions about this study, and we'll have plenty of time to do that. Does that sound like a worthwhile meeting?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you again for coming. Now I'm going to turn it over to the project team to talk a little bit. Please, Adam.
Yeah.
Please remind us who you are.
Yeah. So I'm Adam Wagshall. I'm with the consulting firm ICF, and I'm working with Caltrans. I'm managing with them development of some of the special studies associated with the project and development of the environmental impact report, which I'll be talking more about, and which is why we're here essentially. As you all know, Caltrans is proposing to replace the Salmon Creek project, the Salmon Creek Bridge. Frank's going to talk more about a lot of the details that we know now associated with the proposed project. We're here because the proposed project, Caltrans has determined, requires development of an environmental impact report. That's a document that's developed to satisfy CEQA, the California Environmental Quality Act. There's different types of documents that can be used to satisfy CEQA. EIRs are the most rigorous document and have the greatest amount of public participation and most in-depth environmental analysis. We're at one stage of developing the EIR, which is the scoping. And that's where we're here doing scoping with the community to get input about what we analyze and so forth. So again, CEQA requires that any state or local agency undertaking a project comply with CEQA. Again, in this case, we're developing an environmental impact report. As part of the process, there's public participation. The lead agency, Caltrans, discloses to the public the potential environmental effects of the project and identifies ways to avoid, minimize, or mitigate the environmental effects. And then upon approval of the project, disclose to the public, of course, what the project was, what the environmental effects were found to be. So we're here to get your input to inform the EIR. And I think this third bullet is really important. Scoping is meant to allow the public to share specific local information to inform what's going to be analyzed in the EIR, what are the different environmental topics that we should be looking at, be they aesthetics or biological, so forth, and also to give us information to help make sure we're analyzing the good range of alternatives for how to implement the project. So those are the really specific things that we're trying to get input in terms of scoping. Again, what environmental effects to analyze and what types of alternatives in terms of the projects itself to look at. And once we have that information is used really explicitly to inform what those alternatives are going to be and inform the analysis of the environmental effects. I mean, there's a real direct link between your input right now and what goes into the EIR. And this is a long list, and you know, I actually thought I'm going to read it because, again, your comments link specifically to these categories. What are we looking at in terms of environmental effects for aesthetics? You know, what we see when we're going by these bridges and forth, agricultural resources, air quality, biology, cultural resources, geology and soils, hazards, hydrology, land use planning, mineral resources, noise, population and housing, public services, recreation, transportation, utilities and service systems. The EIR is going to have a section for each of those. So your input right now directly feeds into those sections. And so that's just, I think, something important to think about as you make comments. You know, if there's something specific that we might not catch in terms of how the project would affect land uses, for example, in the area, then this is the time for us to know to make sure that we can get that addressed in that section of the EIR. The other part of the EIR is the cumulative impact section. And so, you know, as you know, none of these projects happen in a vacuum. There's other projects in the area that Caltrans has planned, as you know. There's other projects in the area that other entities are doing, be it the county or private entities. And so when we do this analysis, we also look at the environmental effects of the Salmon Creek Bridge Replacement Project in the context of those other projects. We're not here to belabor on those other projects. I mean, it's good that we need to know about them, and we do. We're focused on Salmon Creek, but to be really clear, the EIR does analyze the project's environmental effects in the context of those other projects, the cumulative impacts. And so this is the process. Caltrans has filed a notice of preparation and sent it out. That indicates they're starting to prepare an EIR. And now we're here, again, doing the scoping to get input, as I said, on what's going to be in that EIR. What environmental impacts to look at, what alternatives to look at. After that, we will prepare a draft of the document, a draft of the EIR, and that'll be circulated for public review. We'll also come back out here and have another public meeting to get verbal comments on that draft EIR. And then we'll take all those comments and we will respond to every single comment. Sometimes they'll be grouped together if they're the same with one master response, but every comment will be responded to and incorporated into the final EIR. We'll take that information and incorporate it as appropriate. And then the EIR will go for certification by Caltrans. And then I'm going to turn over to Frank. I just wanted to sort of reiterate something that Callan said, but I think it's important to express that we don't have all the answers to the project design or the environmental effects right now. This is really where we're starting the process to get your input on what we want to look at in that environmental analysis and in those alternatives in the design. What do we need to consider? So I think we just want to be really explicit that there can be questions where we say, we don't know, that's something we're going to find out, and that is where we are in this process, and appropriately. I'm going to turn over to Frank to talk more about the specifics of the project itself.
Thank you, Adam. Yeah, we'll start out with identifying the project need, and this basically comes from structures maintenance investigations. Every 2 years, there is an inspection performed on the bridge, and structures maintenance provides work recommendations and also evaluates the health of the bridge. And in doing so, there are highway maintenance projects that are initiated that provide for the upkeep of the existing bridge. Now, as that work recommendation comes out and that work is performed, structures maintenance looks at what is the overall cost to continue to maintain the structure, and given the service life remaining on a structure, how much longer can that structure really sustain those maintenance costs? Well, in 2007, Structures Maintenance Investigation provided recommendations to the district that the maintenance costs were non-sustainable. And there was a project initiated within the district in 2009, and there was a project study report, and this project study report is available on the Salmon Creek project webpage that I believe has been distributed to you folks, but if not, we'll go ahead and get that out to you. And in this project study report, there were a number of alternatives identified, and basically we looked at each alternative, the cost of those alternatives, and this is preliminary only for the purpose of programming. And programming is just setting aside dollars for further studies that would allow Caltrans to get to the point that we are now, and that is initiating the preliminary environmental and design studies for the range of alternatives that were actually identified in this project study report. As you know, the current bridge does not meet current safety standards as far as it's seismically vulnerable. It also does not have the shoulder widths necessary to provide safe access for cyclists or pedestrians for that matter. So what we look to now in a lot of these bridge projects we have up and down the Mendocino coast is to provide adequate shoulder widths and also pedestrian walkways for the coastal trail and the Pacific Coast bike route. Also, because the shoulders are approximately 1 foot in width, it doesn't really allow sufficient width for disabled vehicles. And again, if you look here, it says does not allow for uninterrupted traffic movement in the event of a vehicle breakdown or collision. Of course, with the width of the bridge now being 26 feet wide, if there was a collision or accident, emergency vehicles would have to respond. Of course, you would be down to just 1 lane. As I mentioned, it doesn't meet our multimodal transportation needs for the community and visitors, California Coastal Trail, Pacific Coast Bike Route. As I mentioned, we don't have safe access for pedestrians or cyclists because of the narrow width of the bridge deck. And I'm going to ask Eric to come up here to talk a bit more about the bridge and the approach roadways. The transportation concept plan that Caltrans, Coastal Commission, and Mendocino County have come to agreement on is 12-foot lanes and 4-foot shoulders along the highway. So when we look at upgrading, replacing a bridge in this case, and we have anywhere from a 6-foot to 8-foot shoulder width, that would taper down to 4 foot on the roadway. Now, going down to this next bullet on reducing the ongoing maintenance costs, as I mentioned, right now, because this particular bridge is the wrong bridge for the environment, because it is steel, it requires a lot of maintenance, and the costs continue to climb and are not sustainable. And it's reaching the end of its service life. Structures Maintenance Investigation, as I mentioned in the peer review report, recommended that this bridge be replaced with a bridge that's more suited to the environment. Again, it will provide wider shoulders for motorists experiencing breakdowns, safe bicycle pedestrian movement. And the other part of this has to do with some of the long-standing maintenance practices that Caltrans had in place when lead paint was used. And during that time, because there wasn't any containment at the time, these steel girders were actually sandblasted and repainted. That lead found its way onto the property owner's property. So part of this project will include lead remediation, cleaning up the lead in the soil, and basically we'll be doing the revegetation, habitat restoration as a result. Okay, well, as far as the project description, what we're looking at right now is we have 4 alignment alternatives, and 2 in the west side, 2 in the east, and I'll explain that a little bit more. The 2 on the west, one is completely clear of the existing bridge. One alignment is just slightly west of the existing center line alignment of the bridge. As far as the 2 on the east side, one of the easterly alignments is clear of the existing bridge, and the other easterly alignment is just offset from the existing center line of the bridge. So in effect, 2 of the bridge's alternatives that we're discussing here would be built on their own, free and clear of the existing bridge, whereas the other 2 that are slightly east or slightly west of the center line alignment require what's known as half-width construction. Half the bridge would have to be constructed, the existing bridge would have to be demoed, and then the other half of the new bridge would be constructed. So there are 3 structure types that we're currently looking at for each of these alternatives. Box girder, and over to your right, we've got the 3 examples. On the bottom is the box girder. Then there's the modern arch, just above that in the center, and then the spandrel arch at the top. Here's your modern arch, and again, the advanced planning study that was developed by our structures design unit has developed various bridge types with each alternative, and that information is available on our project webpage so that you can correlate which of these alternatives are looking at each bridge type, so you get a sense of how each one of these alternatives is taking advantage of each one of these bridge types that you see over here on the display. And here's your spandrel arch. You notice the difference. Okay, we'll go back here. The spandrel arch has more supports than the modern arch, and then back down to the box girder. Next. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Frank. As a reminder, here we are in the scoping phase, interested in what you would like to see both in terms of what is analyzed and how the study goes, as well as what type of outcomes you would like to see. Interested in hearing both of those things. And as a reminder again, several ways to submit those comments. One is you can write it down on a form and submit it. Another is to send forms or materials up until October 5th during the scoping phase. Another is to come back next week for this meeting. And given all of those opportunities, in some public meetings, sometimes it's most useful to do limited comment periods where we go one at a time. Given that there's a bunch of other ways to comment, I think you tell me, but it seems like this is a better opportunity to have a conversation.
I would like to ask a question.
Yes, great.
Okay. So the current bridge, I heard, is 26 feet wide. I don't remember which one of you said it, but
Yeah.
about 26 feet. And the proposed bridge is?
Well, you have 12-foot lanes, and if, right now, there's an option between 6-foot and 8-foot shoulders. So you're talking 12 feet, plus if we went with the 8, we'd want to be 40, and then we have a 6-foot separated pedestrian walkway for 46. Probably add another 4 feet for the railing and the barrier, so up to 50 feet.
50.
50 feet.
It's about twice as wide.
That's correct.
Is that 3 lanes?
No, that's just 2 lanes.
And a pedestrian.
So there's 2 lanes. Right now, there's only 1 foot shoulder. And we've had discussions with Coastal Commission on what the appropriate shoulder width would be for various bridges along the Mendocino coast. As you probably know, the 10 Mile River Bridge has 6-foot shoulders, but it has a lower traffic volume than Salmon Creek Bridge, where Albion Bridge does. Also, Greenwood Creek has 6-foot shoulders, but it's south of the 128-1 intersection, and it also has lower traffic volumes. In this instance, we're looking at 6-foot to 8-foot shoulders. We don't know yet what, we're still in the early stages, and it could be somewhere between 6 to 8 feet. But we definitely are looking at having the 6-foot separated pedestrian walkway, because that is the California Coastal Trail, and that separated pedestrian walkway would be on the west side. After conversations, of course, with the Coastal Commission, that's the preferred location for any pedestrian walkway for the Coastal Trail.
The left side going where, north or south?
That would be on the west side.
West side.
West side. Yes?
Is it,
Did you have a follow-up?
would it be possible to just put that, like, extra right-of-way on one side, like the west side, and just leave the other, just put it all on one side? Sufficient to, meet that requirement that,
Not as wide then?
yeah, not as wide.
Why not?
I'm all for the bridge being replaced or something being done to it, because I live, half a mile or more south of that, on the ocean side. So there's a hill between my house and that bridge, and I can hear the bridge at night.
You're
Clack,
asking
clack,
for it to be a
clack, clack,
shoulder
every-
only on one side.
Every car that goes over that bridge makes an extraordinary amount of noise.
Well, there wouldn't be more cars traveling over it necessarily.
There wouldn't be more
Well, I'm
cars.
talking about the current bridge,
Yeah.
Right.
you know,
So
and
what's your
hopefully
question regarding the current
that
bridge?
would, yeah.
Your question again regarding the current?
My question would be, it's more of stating my problem with the current bridge and the way it's designed, because the cuts in the concrete, for the expansion of the bridge, when a car goes over those, it makes a loud sound. It's clack, 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 clack. You can tell how,
Well, you're
I
not gonna
can
get that
determine their
with the concrete
speed.
bridge. And Eric, maybe you'd like to speak to that.
Yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about. I mean, I've slept with it, I've stayed up on Navarro Ridge Road at a relative's place, and you can hear the bridge all night long, even at that distance, so I know what you mean, but it's a steel bridge, I mean, and it rings.
What will be the
Like a
difference
bell, but-
in noise with the new bridge versus, I mean, just.
Well,
I don't know
I'm
for
not
sure.
gonna say, how many, but in general, I think, a new concrete bridge would be quieter than an old steel bridge with a lot of joints
You're right.
and poor surface.
Well, and I think it's a perfect comment, and I don't mean to reframe, what you're stating, but to the extent we can take measures to minimize the noise to Navarro Ridge and other places, that should be something we consider in the design elements, right?
Yes,
I think that's
absolutely.
exactly the kind
That's
of
a big
feedback we
factor,
want.
that's why I brought it up.
But, yeah, no, that's a very good comment, thank you.
Please.
Yes. So, we live on Spring Grove Road, which you probably have an idea. And we got in the mail this attachment, where my question is about during the process of building the bridge. Here it says that the material, the vehicle staging area, the material stockpiled at the end of the paved section of Spring Grove Road.
Let me address
So-
that. I think what you're looking at there is that for the interim measures project?
Yeah.
Yes. Right now, we have an interim measures project because of the lead contamination on the
Yes.
Salmon Creek property. We've been working with the Department of Substance Toxic Control on ways to mitigate the exposure
I
to
read
lead
this.
dust to the property owners. And in consultation with the DTSC and the property owners, we've determined that the best course of action here is to provide an interim measure to the property owners so they can continue to enjoy their property, and that would involve capping the existing road in the areas surrounding their vacation residence. And so this will be a short-term solution for us until we get around to actually replacing the structure.
Did you get to your question? Yeah,
Exactly.
please go right ahead.
My
Yes.
question. I am okay with people having to put their material somewhere. This is not the question. The fact is that we have the waste management company comes to pick up our trash, and it's only because of that turnaround that they're able to do it. They have regulations too. If this is crowded and the truck cannot do the turnaround, I don't get any more service. And that is a problem.
Understood.
Because, carrying big loads of stuff in the car and at the dump is very hard for me. So also, I did notice that road is sometimes used by vehicles like Caltrans or PG&E, and they go at the end of the road and they generally think that nobody's living on that road because our house is kind of almost very hard to see and the land next to it is vacant. So they think because nobody is living there, they sometimes left their truck or their car idle for a while, or their music, like whatever it is. So there is this idea, or they drive fast also, because they assume that this is a road that is not very used, but there is a lot of people actually walking on that road because the view is very nice. We also have pets. But mainly, my question is that while this is being crowded, how does waste management is going to do the turnaround and come pick up my trash? That will definitely, they will stop the service if they cannot do that.
Well, we will definitely follow up with Waste Management Services, and we'll talk to our resident engineer, and we'll definitely make accommodations so that isn't an issue for you.
Yes, it is.
We'll make it so it's not an issue for you, okay?
That's better.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Please.
I don't see any lighting fixtures on these models. Will there be any kind of light poles on these, or?
Great question.
Currently, there are no light standards being proposed. That doesn't mean that we could not consider, or would not consider recessed lighting along the walkways. We have been discussing that for our Pudding Creek bridge widening and rail upgrade project, is to add recessed lighting. That is something that would be considered as part of the visual analysis. And our landscape architecture branch would be looking at that. And of course, we would be soliciting public comment for that as well.
Anything you want to say about lights? Any preferences?
Well, recessed lighting is fine. I would prefer no light poles jutting up from the roadbed, but.
Because of visual impact and or light pollution? Visual impact and or maybe some light pollution too?
Visual impact, and I think the recessed lighting along the walls, or whatever you call them, aesthetically pleasing.
Please.
The question kind of goes back, actually, earlier. So when you're going to do Caltrans will prepare an EIR, or gather the information, who's the consultant, botanical consultant for the project? Is it from within Caltrans or some outside of Caltrans?
It's a combination. There's already been a lot of biology work done, including, I believe, rare plant studies.
Is everybody able to hear? Okay, sorry to interrupt.
And some of that work was done by Caltrans staff and some by the consulting firm ICF.
Would that be available if I asked a question and you could send me that information, or?
Yeah,
Okay.
as it's ready, absolutely, yeah.
I mean the consultants that are doing the work.
You'd like to know who the team is?
Yeah, I'd like to know who the team is.
I can give you my card. Yeah.
Okay, all right, thanks.
Yeah.
Can we get like an aerial shot that would define the outer boundary and that you propose, along with the asphalted roadway? It shows where the walkways are and which are required by the Coastal Commission and what your options are there, because
Yeah.
what I'm hearing is our road doesn't need to be as wide as you guys are planning it. I think it needs to have some work done to it, or expand it somehow, but it functions for us.
So I think there's two questions in there. Your first question is about getting information about, aerial photo of the footprint, the proposed footprint of the different alternatives. Of course, all that information is going to be provided in the draft EIR, which again, you'll have the opportunity to comment on. We'll have another public meeting here regarding that. So absolutely, all that will be made available for your comment. I mean,
And a preference in there, right, was the second part.
yeah, your preference for a more narrow bridge. I know there's some requirements of Department of.
For FHWA, for federal funding, there are requirements by FHWA. Caltrans has design standards as well, and we negotiate with a coastal commission on shoulder widths. But there is information already online that shows the alternatives that are currently being studied, the advanced planning study that was developed for each of the alternatives that were discussed. So that information is readily available on the Caltrans project webpage for Salmon Creek.
Schematic. Yeah.
Please. Did that answer your question?
Yes.
I think you mentioned that you were going to, or maybe I misheard, but you were going to talk about dates. Do we have any date for when? I know it's not exact. Eventually it's an exact science, but eventually, at what point are things going to start?
Great. Timeline of study and or possible construction, I think was part of the question as well, right?
Yeah. Including what I was asking about, the preliminary capping project.
I don't know if this is that helpful, but.
Well, I guess I'll start with the interim project. We recently had our coastal development permit with the county released so that we can now pull our grading permit. We're still working on getting a grading contractor on board to actually perform that work. We're hoping that we can begin the interim measures after the permit waiver is granted by the Coastal Commission, which should happen, we hope, tomorrow. Once that waiver is granted, then DTSC, Department of Toxic Substance Control, issues a 10-day notice before work can begin. So in effect, that work should begin or could begin as early as 10 days from tomorrow. That's for the interim measures project. Now for the Salmon Creek project, County of Mendocino did release our coastal development permit for a grading permit for the geotechnical investigation. Our geotech investigation needs to be completed before we reach our final environmental document. It's necessary to have the geotech information because that way we can properly analyze each of the alternatives, and we go through a rigorous alternatives analysis and life cycle cost analysis for each of those alternatives. Right now, we're actually targeting August of 2019, I believe, for our draft environmental document. And most likely, we would be looking at early to mid 2020 before we have a final environmental document. And then, in all reality, I couldn't see this project even beginning until late 2022. At the earliest.
That's to initiate construction. Any guesses on length of construction?
2 to 3 years.
And how long will the capping project take? The one that's starting in 10
Shouldn't take any longer than 4 weeks is what we're estimating.
Okay.
So there would be a traffic light on both sides of the bridge that people they'd stop now and they would proceed because the bridge would be cut back to, what, 2 lanes?
Are you talking about on the replacement alternatives, if the alternatives that are going to be constructed on alignment where you have half the construction, you would build half the bridge and then you would end up demolishing the existing bridge, move traffic over, and you would, basically in that instance here, I believe we would still be able to have two-way control traffic, or two-way traffic, or were we talking about just one-way control traffic?
We've been looking at both, but our initial determination that we would have a traffic signal during that time.
3 years.
That we were building the other half of the bridge.
So that would
That's the question I have hearing is how much driving impact? What's it mean for local drivers for those 3 years?
It could mean a traffic signal, depending on the alternative. If you do a standalone where you don't do the half-width construction, the existing bridge would be in use two-way traffic until traffic was put on the new bridge. So you would just have the transition where the tie-ins at each end, that would be
That would be two-way traffic either way.
Yeah.
But if it's, they're talking about like building the bridge on the same alternative, right? So what we're here to talk about is looking at different alternatives and what we'll want input on. So if you move the whole bridge to the east, for example, a new alternative, and tell me if I get this wrong, but then you could keep most traffic open, but there would be some traffic impacts when you switch traffic to the bridge.
Because you have to build the little segment onto the new road.
Right, but
that would be a lot shorter.
So there's a range, but.
1, 2, please. 3.
If we go with the full width, the 50-foot, building half of that would give us almost the width we have today. Is there any possibility of getting two-way traffic by not cutting the width down?
Well, usually when you do a half-width construction, you don't really build, you build a portion.
And we wouldn't build the sidewalk either.
I guess what I'm asking is if, as a community, if we argue against the 50-foot and we get 46 instead, will that limit the two-way traffic potential? By going full width, do we have the option of having two-way traffic during that 3-year period?
When you say going to the 40, you're talking about like the 6-foot shoulders.
Yeah. If they were willing to sacrifice visual impacts in the long run for construction impacts in the near term, is that a threshold? Would that make a difference? Was that the right question?
That's just one issue, I believe.
Indeed. Indeed. Hard
Well,
to say.
the east and the west alignments that are clear of the existing bridge, of course, you wouldn't have the same traffic impacts as the on-alignment alternatives that are slightly east or slightly west of the existing alignment, the existing bridge. So the question, could you basically narrow the bridge and then eliminate the need for...
If they ask you to go narrower, are they precluding options to not have as much traffic impact?
Thank you.
Right. And I suspect the answer is we don't know yet, and that you want them to study this as they analyze the alternatives, which alternatives and at what widths minimize traffic impacts during the course of construction. To the extent they have an answer now, I think you'll hear it. And I don't think there's a full answer now, I'm guessing, but.
When could we expect an answer?
We could look at the actual alignment alternatives and whether or not they would reduce the traffic impacts by moving that alignment either slightly east or west from what's currently proposed.
And to the extent that width would play into that, you'll take a look at that too.
Well, at this point, our own design standards wouldn't allow us, even under a design exception, to reduce the shoulder width any less than 6 feet. So we would be looking at 12-foot lanes, 6-foot shoulders, and a 6-foot separated pedestrian walkway. So in effect, you're talking about the 36 for the roadway, and then the 6-foot for the pedestrian walkway for 42 feet, but then you need to add the other 4 feet to the bridge rating, so now you're up to 46 feet.
Yeah, which they may want to argue for. And what I heard was if that makes a difference in traffic impacts during construction, they'd like to know about it. Right? Okay.
Okay.
Please.
So ballpark, what's the difference in the cost, just ballpark, between, taking into consideration the impact? And secondly, what are the advantages for a narrower bridge? I can think aesthetically, but are there other advantages in terms of why people are?
Well, if the walkway was limited to one side of the bridge and the other one was open, whether it be the east side or west side, at least the visual impacts for people on that bridge, they're not going to see a extra structure beyond what they see now, which is you see water. You go over the bridge, you see water. But I think in your proposal that the factors that we don't know yet are what are the visual obstructions, that are more than what we have now. And I'm not advocating or advocating that leave the bridge by any standards, but,
No, it's a great question, and you've probably driven across the 10 Mile River Bridge and seen
Yes.
the railing and see-through. And that's basically what we would be looking at for the replacement structure. Compared to what's there now, you have the barrier rail between the pedestrian walkway and live traffic, but you only have a pedestrian rail on the outside edge where the pedestrian walkway is. So it would be see-through, more so than it is now. But the west side of the bridge is where the Coastal Commission looks to Caltrans to place the coastal trail, or the pedestrian walkway in this case.
Did that answer your question?
yeah, well,
But I
The
would,
second one.
if I could just, I mean, but.
that would still open up the view to, in the other
Oh,
direction.
thank
If
you.
it was on, if the coastal commission is going to require that there be this,
Not required
pathway,
necessarily.
okay,
Yeah.
I know the answer to that question, but then we would, engineer the walkway on the left side of the bridge. The left side meaning you're going north. And just leave the other side.
On the east side.
Just,
Yeah.
no extra footage, anything like that, no walkways, just, there's a walkway on one side of the bridge.
We're only
Then-
proposing a walkway on one side of the bridge right
The
now.
water
water
side,
side.
the west side.
I
Right.
think you're
And-
requesting, and I said, again, I don't mean to put, but like, that we analyze the differences in putting the walkway on the east side versus the west side.
Right.
And so,
My
just.
understanding is
One
you've got
side.
a walkway in both
No,
directions.
no, for
it's
salmon,
just-
it'll only be
just the
one
west
side.
Oh, see,
Yeah.
I didn't.
No, yeah, no, that's
that
what,
part.
but I
Sorry.
just want to point out, like, these last two topics that came up in terms of what are the different traffic implications for the different alternatives, and what are the different visual effect implications for the different alternatives. Those are precisely two of the things that the EIR will look at really explicitly, and you'll have a chance to comment on the draft EIR to see if in your mind we missed anything, or you have a different perspective. Because some of that stuff is subjective, obviously visual effects are, subjective to some extent.
But we'll also have you'll have some pretty good numbers around traffic and traffic impacts. And
Traffic is more quantitative.
Yeah. And there was a question there about costs. Anything to say? It's
Didn't come from me.
For me.
No, yeah, you're right.
The ballpark between the doing half, I forget what the technical terms are, but
Half width versus full width, it's less expensive to do a bridge, to build the entire bridge in one go, because there's less duplication. We've had a number of iterations of estimating, and it's all very preliminary, but granted, I haven't looked at it in a while, but in my mind, I recall something like maybe a $5 million difference in cost for everything the same except, one is half width. And the other thing that you give with a half width, the project takes longer for the same reason, you're having to
but less
build.
impact.
Well,
during
there's
construction.
less, you're making use of some of the real estate under the existing bridge, but the overall, when you're done and everything's gone, it's gonna be the same bridge that either way. So,
but possibly more intense impacts during a shorter period. That's the trade-off.
Right,
Yeah.
thank you.
Wally?
You have proposed completion of 2025. Does that include any and all dismantle work also?
No.
Depending upon which option, you got an old bridge to dismantle.
right, and that's included in the estimate.
New construction, or that includes dismantle?
It includes building the bridge and dismantling
Okay.
the existing bridge.
So we can write that date in stone, right?
Please.
Would the new bridge impact the entrance to Pacific Reef subdivision?
It depends, well, yes, it will alter it from what it is now, because the alignment of any of there's four, Frank went through that before, but there's four alternatives, and there's two on the west side of the existing bridge and two on the east side. And one of them is a full width and the others is a half width construction. So it's kind of like a mirror image on each side of the existing bridge. And in each case, it affects Pacific Reef's entrance differently. And so under some of them, we're going to we would reattach it to, so it would move the location of it somewhat.
What of the gate, is that what you're saying?
Yeah, the gate, it would, we would move the entrance south because the bridge is gonna be a little longer than the existing bridge. And so, and it'll be higher. And so the Pacific Reef's entrance would need to go up higher, and to do that, we would probably push it southerly.
Is it, since there's houses immediately inside the gate on both sides of our road, is it gonna impact those homeowners?
We're not hitting any of the houses, but there will be some impacts to, you know, if we move it to the south, we're gonna have to realign it, so that will have some impacts to the south. And then it would change how that last structure on the creek side, they would have to go a little further down the road to go in there, at least in the way we've looked at it to date, so.
On the west side, are you still talking about the west side?
Yeah, so the road, if we move the road south, it's just gonna have to re-plug in everybody right in that area near the highway. So right now, it's here, and under a couple of the alternatives,
As you like, please come on
we
up.
would kind of rotate the road and connect it a little bit further south. So we would, so there's a house here and there's a structure here, and we're not proposing hitting either structure. It would affect this area here, which is right now kind of a big brush pile.
So the house that is,
Closest to the highway there.
Yeah, I mean, nothing's changing back here. It's just that we just need to
So-
reconnect.
so there's a house right inside the gate, pretty much right inside the gate. That must be it right there.
Right,
Or is it that one?
Well, that's the one on the other side.
right. We're
So-
not hitting that.
You're not gonna hit that.
No.
What about these people?
Well, that's why I say if we warp the road a little bit further south here, they may have to access it by kind of coming in and then going like kind of around it and go right to it. Because the road will be a little bit higher when you come in off the highway. Because the new alignment's gonna be up higher than the existing. And it's gonna be, if you go east, it's gonna be further away. I mean, it's hard to describe in words, but.
It sounds like the entrance will be different, but the structures themselves won't be impacted, is that accurate?
Right, and you know, just by moving the road, it's gonna change
Okay.
some things.
Will we have to get a new gate?
Yes,
And will Caltrans pay for that?
that would be part of the project.
Okay.
That would be a right-of-way impact that we would have to,
Take care of?
compensate, yeah, we would have
Okay.
to
Okay.
either construct or pay to have constructed a new entrance gate.
Okay. This is just an aside, but has Caltrans ever thought about not having a passing lane in this area, doing away with it? When, for us that live in Pacific Reefs, if we're going northbound and we have to come down and make a left-hand turn to get into the subdivision, there have been people that decided to pass at that point, and it always seems crazy to me that we have any passing lane in this section where it really is, visibility to me is not that, it's not that great.
And you mean by passing, just the
Broken lines.
It has a, broken yellow.
Broken lines, yeah.
Center straight.
Yeah, I just throw that in for my 2 cents.
Well, and that's certainly something.
We did have, there were, I will tell you this, that there were California state employees that were from Santa Rosa that were water people coming out to inspect our water system. And they were coming up from, 128, so they had to make a left-hand turn to get into Pacific Reefs. And as they started to make their left-hand turn, a lady from Elk decided to pass them and ran into them. Now, it was really fortunate that no one was seriously injured, but, anyway, I just thought I'd tell
We
you
were
all
standing
that,
there-
since you weren't.
We were standing there today, looking at the bridge, and someone came by at about 90, and CHP pulled and got them right there too. But
Oh, good.
people are whipping through there.
Yeah, they do. So anything that discourages them from passing and things like that would be much appreciated, in my opinion.
Thank you.
Yeah, I was just wondering what the deadline is for choosing which type of bridge you're going to build.
Well,
How long for alternatives analysis and selection? So
well, it
DEA
won't be chosen until, what would Frank say, August 2019? That's when potentially the EIR would be finalized. There'd be a, recommendation for, the preferred project and a preferred alternative. But, it's up to Caltrans at that point to decide.
So December 2019.
Yeah.
And please keep me honest, you're next. Please keep me honest. So they go home, do a bunch of homework on the range of alternatives, what their different impacts are, what they cost, what some of these different other things. They come out with a draft that says, we think this is the best answer and why. That's when they want, again, comment from you about how they did on the analysis, which alternative they picked, et cetera. Then they go home again and make everything final before they stamp it. But this is a big milestone. The idea is to try to not make too much change between the draft and the final. Hopefully you did the work to get it right.
Yeah, so I might have said those dates wrong then, I apologize. The draft would be August 2019, so the final decision on it would be mid-2020.
I haven't forgotten you, but I think you had a follow-up.
But just to follow up, do you guys do anything as quaint as just let the community vote on which style bridge they like?
No.
I have a possible answer for that. Again, A is a representation question.
I'm not saying that we are.
No, this is a totally valid question. I mean, this is actually a fascinating democratic question. Community should have a lot of say in a decision that impacts them, and arguably local community is impacted more than others. And there are other communities and user groups that should weigh in, and not only do they have to check with other agencies such as the Coastal Commission and other partners and weigh that into the analysis. Then there's the actual analysis of the different impacts where they have to plant a flag at some point and say, after weighing these different range of alternatives as well as community needs, as well as cost, as well as this big green book that describes how we build highways, they have to put all that in the blender and then come out, and then they're on the hook to give you a clear answer of how they got there. So I'll speak for you, and then please correct me if I got it wrong. I think they want to hear from you about what your favorite solution is and to weigh that into their decision. And can they hand over the decision-making by turning it over to a vote? No, they actually...
I'm not saying they should hand over, I just wonder why we don't, it's just, could be one other factor in your decision, so.
Indeed. If there's a clear message that comes from the community, I think that will be received, I mean, that will be heard.
Right, but vote, if we vote in individually, none of us know what the community preferred. But if we go actually to a vote, we'd say, at least as a community, well, this is the one that we like. If you can't do it, fine, but at least we know as a community that's the one that we chose, one way or the other.
I think it's possible as long as it's known that it doesn't come with the expectation that the vote will be the final answer.
Right.
That you're saying, we want our voice to be louder, because we're saying it together.
Well, otherwise it's like a secret ballot, and I don't like secret
Sure.
ballots.
Makes sense to me. Thank you for your patience. Yeah, you.
Okay, well, looking at these three designs, it seems to me, now I may be making an assumption here, but it seems to me that the bottom design, which is the box girder, would have the least amount of environmental impact. it looks like you'd only have to, if the word is correct, pile drive two supporting beams or structures. And in the middle one, you need 3 at least, and the other one you need 5. So to me, it looks like the least environmentally damaging would be the bottom one. And also, I think, if I heard Frank correctly, it's cheapest. It's only 20 million, whereas the top one, I think, is close to 30 million. So it's for me anyway, if I'm on the Caltrans board, it's a no-brainer. You go with the easiest to build, the least environmental damage, and the cheapest.
As long as it's not too
And it's
ugly, right?
aesthetically pleasing.
Yeah, indeed, I like that one, actually. Yes, indeed, as long as it's not ugly.
But am I correct that it would be only two pile driving things?
At the risk of sounding like a broken record, the analysis will reveal all of the impacts and costs and other things. And is there anything to say now about the relative cost or impacts of the different bridge designs? Is there anything, I mean, we haven't done the analysis, so we don't know, but in general, when speaking about these types of structures, can you say anything about relative impacts?
Not until we complete the geotechnical investigation and we do a rigorous alternatives analysis and we provide the detailed site description to environmentalists so they can assess what the impacts are from each one of those alternatives.
And all those different categories of environmental effects, aesthetics, biology, noise.
I would like to let it be known that
You may be right.
for that number 3 style bridge also.
And by the way, the box girder is 23 million.
That's the box girder.
Yes.
All in favor?
We're all in
If
favor.
you have aesthetic favorites, go ahead and say so.
So you don't have to redesign.
1, 2, please.
So actually, we've talked about the geotechnical. When is it going to start and what is it going to entail?
Well, we'd like to think we could get a contractor out there within the next couple of weeks. We're still working on that. And our hope is to at least get the access road constructed before October 15th so that we can get in and complete the investigation before this winter.
Please.
So earlier I heard you talking about other projects that are tie-ins to this project. Some of those projects are the road widening, is that correct? Or is the road widening on either end of the bridge, is that part of
That's part of the
doing the
project.
bridge?
That's
That's part of the project. I mean, I'm talking about the whole widening that you were talking about,
Of the roadway.
of the roadway.
Of the roadway,
Beyond
Yes.
scope
for
of
the
your
approach
bridge.
to the bridge, to accommodate the new bridge, basically, right?
Correct.
Yeah, that's part of
So
part
like
of the
now,
project.
it's very narrow, especially where the land trust land is,
Yeah,
that's a
yes,
very narrow
yes.
patch. Is that,
That's part
that
of
road
the
widening,
project.
is that part of, what did you say?
That's part of the project.
That is part of the
Yeah,
project,
this
okay.
project.
The land trust
Okay.
property, what are you talking
Wow.
about?
You
Navarro
know,
Point.
is that what it is,
Right.
Navarro Point? Yeah.
It goes south of the bridge.
Is
So
that
you're
like
south of
past
the,
Navarro Ridge Road?
Just past
Just-
Red Road.
yeah,
That's
the
not-
land
that's
trust.
not part of this.
No,
So
a
that's
separate
not part of
project.
that. So how far south and north of the bridge is considered roadway widening?
Just
For this
the
project.
approach to the bridge. I mean, I don't know.
Eric, is that typically like in this instance, no more than 200 feet, 150 to 200 feet would typically be the transition between the bridge shoulder width down to 4 foot for the existing roadway is based on design speed.
Right, it's WB. Well, okay, it's probably easier just to show you the picture format, but there's like the top of the hill is down here. We're tying in, like, let's say, we're gonna pick, in this case, like the red alignment, which is the furthest east. So the road is gonna be, what it is, and then at some point, probably on the, the straightaway down the hill, we would begin the project, and it will go on a different alignment, over here, and it'll transition to the 4-foot shoulders and 2 12-foot lanes, 32 feet. And then as you get near the bridge, then it's gonna widen out a little more to whatever the shoulders on the bridge are. You cross the creek on the bridge, and then it'll narrow back in. And we've been, you know, the project ends out here somewhere, depending on the alignment, of course. So, you know, this is the region that we're affecting with, like, it'll have the 32-foot width roadway on each side of the bridge, and then it'll converge back down to the existing highway width, whatever that is,
Okay.
at each end.
So then, that's gonna be an even more,
It's a bottleneck.
it's gonna be, yeah, it's gonna bottleneck on both sides, kind of, yeah, or no?
Well,
Or at least it's gonna feel like it, that bridge will become a speedway, because it's really a thin road. People go off that road all the time.
This
To the
sounds like another
west side.
preference, like the one we were talking about earlier, is when you consider designs, think about speeds and how people are gonna use this road. What happens when they're going fast and they have to bottle down, or they're, yeah.
The lane size is the same, right?
Yeah, the lane
The
width
lane
is the
size is
same,
the
it's
same.
just the shoulders is going from,
I see.
I can't off the top of my head, there's not a whole lot of shoulder on either end.
Right.
And it'll go to a 4-foot shoulder, and the bridge will have, you know, our current alternative is to have an 8-foot shoulder on the bridge.
Please.
You mentioned studying cumulative impact. What other projects have you identified, aside from the Albion Bridge, that would be running concurrent with this project?
It's not only concurrent, you know, but any reasonably foreseeable project would be included in that.
What are those projects that have been identified to date?
I can go down the list. There's the Navarro Ridge Safety Project. There's also the Navarro Drainage Project. We've got, I'll start from the south heading north. We've got the Elk Creek Bridge Replacement Project. We've got the Little River Bridge Replacement Project, the Jack Peters Bridge widening and rail upgrade. The Russian Gulch Bridge is possibly going to be widened and the rail upgraded, or it could be replaced. That's further down the line. Hare Creek is another bridge that we're looking at widening and upgrading the rail. Aside from that, we've got some other projects that we're looking to, basically safety projects up and down the coast. But you know, all those projects are identified. I'll post those onto our Salmon Creek project page so you have a list. That's basically a rough list of what we have currently in plan.
While you're still standing, if I could ask a follow-up. What I'm getting at is for folks who live south of the Salmon Creek Bridge and commute to Mendocino, they probably don't want to have multiple stoplights or multiple intrusions on the flow of traffic. Will the Albion Bridge have an impact on traffic at the same time as Salmon Creek?
We don't know that.
Or is there a way Caltrans can align those two projects so that we don't have that cumulative impact on traffic?
So that would be something we would study as part of our design.
Thank you.
Great comment. Please.
I was in Mendocino when you had an open house in Mendocino, and you had some materials out. I have a copy here of the Salmon Creek Bridge Improvement Project, the fact sheet. And actually, you still have that on your webpage, that fact sheet. I wonder at what point the Salmon Creek Bridge Improvement Project became a replacement project. And I have a whole bunch of other comments, so it's maybe easier for me just to throw them out, and maybe you want to note them down. You mention here in your...
Well, I'll answer that first question for you,
Okay.
Anne Marie. In 2009, when the project study report was released, it was identified as a bridge replacement project.
2009.
That's correct.
Yeah.
So why would you have that still on your webpage then if it's not accurate anymore?
It is still an improvement project as a replacement project.
So it sounds like a nomenclature thing.
Yeah, I would like to point out, I don't know if that point has been made, that when you do an EIR, you always have a no-build option, meaning to leave the bridge the way it is, maintain it, repair it, and you have the rehabilitation option, and you have a new bridge option. And it looks like we have a lot of options to choose from, like 4 of them that you list here, the 4 different ways it could go, and the 3 different options you list here. But, and so you're asking for the community to come up with comments by October 5th, while we're still dealing with Albion River Bridge issues with that geotechnical survey. Tomorrow will be Coastal Commission meeting, and in the director's report will be the waiver for the issue to deal with the lead dust that has been accumulating for decades. And I don't understand the hurry. We had private independent engineers look at this bridge, and they did not find that it's falling apart right this minute. So I would also support what Ted was saying. Before we can tell you what we feel and think, we need to know from you what you're going to do, which includes everything. It includes the highway widening from Gualala to Leggett. Unless we know that, we cannot have any idea, and that's what is meant by the cumulative impact, is everything, all the culverts, all the noise, all the dust, all the lead, so here you mention in your pamphlet that resources to be analyzed, the EIR will examine the effects the project could have. It's not could have, it will have, it does have. You have a mandate to address each point.
True.
It's not just, well, we might if we like it, and we might not if we don't like it.
True.
So I think the sensitive issue for a lot of people in this community is who have gone with you through the process of looking at the Albion Bridge since at least 2009. It looks like we are being asked or we have options, but it doesn't at the end. And you try to get waivers, you've tried, it's in the director's report, that issue about the Salmon Bridge, so the director can just say he's agreeing, and you have your permit and you can move on, and everything is rushed. People come here, some of the people for one meeting, it was scheduled on a Jewish holiday, and a lot of people who can't come tonight because they're Jewish, are of that belief. So it splits the community apart. And before you ask for a deadline of October 5th, I think we need that second meeting, and then we'll have a third meeting where we come together as a community, not this group and that group, the Jewish people and the non-Jewish people. It does not seem like an appropriate way to go about it, because the community is sensitized because of what's been happening with Albion. It's at the end, we're being told we want one arch and it's on the west side, and nobody ever looks into, is this bridge salvageable? Is this bridge really safe? Maybe that bridge is still very safe. I know you're saying maintenance is expensive and all of that. Another point, I have not seen a notice of pending permit on Salmon Creek Bridge or on Albion River Bridge. Notices have been put up where they fall down in other places where nobody sees them. There is one still laying on the ground somewhere by the corner of Highway 1 and Albion Little River Road. It's not done so people really know what's happening. And the people need to be told everything. So it seems that there is too much happening with 8 bridges possibly being worked on or being torn down, and people here have a hard time making enough money raising their children, driving to work, which might be far away from where they live, and schooling and after-school care and all of that. This is really not a good way to go about it. So I feel that there's a lot of information missing. Like Frank, you were saying, the railings now are mandated to be twice as tall. I mean,
I did not say the railing was meant to be twice as tall.
I misunderstood then what you said. When you talked about the Albion Bridge, you said there's new mandates where the railings have to be twice as high.
I did not say it was twice as tall. There's a new standard for bridge railing.
Okay,
That's
so
correct.
I might have heard you wrong, so I apologize for that. But in terms of bike lanes, are you calling on somebody else?
Yes, there's a couple of people that want to come in afterwards, and so I'm noting that they're coming next. You are welcome to finish, please finish, and actually, I would like to try to summarize to see if I heard these points right, if I can, but I don't want to cut you off.
I would like to finish talking.
That's what I'm saying, please
Yeah.
do.
But it makes me nervous when your hand is up because I don't
I
know.
understand, but I also have to honor other people in the room, so that's actually partly a reminder that other people do want to participate, so please take the time you need, please.
In terms of bike lanes and lanes for pedestrians, I'm all for it. It needs to be safe. But there could maybe be some creative ways. There could maybe be a different bridge, who knows? It just feels that if we're just told, well, you have option 1, 2, or 3, and then you ask us to fill out the paper, and then people say, well, this is, I can put up with this. Number 3 is what I can put up with. But it's not like brainstorming. Like for the Albion Bridge, the Arch Bridge might be the absolute wrong bridge because it might not work with the boats and how low the water is at times. And it might be a problem with high tides and storm surges. So then you jump to a geotechnical survey, which is the beginning of a new bridge, where it almost feels it's too late. It's too late in the game because we're already tearing down, in the case of the Albion River Bridge, 100 or more eucalyptus trees. We're already creating all this noise, this damage with helicopters, closing roads, closing the bridge for up to 30 minutes at a time. You're basically paralyzing a community, and it's not in the sense of let's work together, let's figure this out. How can we do it that it's the least obstructive, the least damaging as far as the environment, as far as the finances? What about all the greenhouse gases with new bridges? I mean, it's all, what about all the trucks that it takes to haul away an old bridge? There may be ways to make this so it still works. And it just seems that it's more lip service that I'm hearing when we're looking at that, and you're giving us timeline. By then we'll do this and this and this and this, and it seems that's not appropriate to go about it that way. You know that the Coastal Commission might not let you do these wide shoulders, and I remember being in Mendocino when we heard that the Albion Bridge will now all of a sudden be 54 feet wide, twice as wide as the current one. The Coastal Act was created with the intent that we only have 2 lanes. And yes, you're doing 2 lanes, but by all these shoulders, it gets out of proportions. We have a big income here, which is tourism. We don't have fishing, we don't have logging anymore, and these tourists come here because they want to get away from the craziness from San Francisco and LA or wherever they live. They come here for the beauty, the nature, and when you have a wider bridge, people will be driving faster. You'll have more accidents. It's not in the interest of this area I mean, for you, you're in the business of doing that, and I know you have the safety aspect that you need to look at, and you've been doing an okay job keeping these roads and keeping us safe. I'm not, I'm recognizing that, but it does seem that this is not the right way to go about it with this community, who is very sensitized at this point. And you're saying you're transparent, but you're not. There's things that are not according to the Coastal Act with Salmon Bridge, with Albion River Bridge. They are not up to snuff with CEQA or NEPA. And it is important that you as an agency start really showing that you're transparent. Start showing that you want to work with us. And then we can have a great solution. We can work on it together, because there might be skills people have in this area in terms of wooden bridges. Maybe Caltrans is not specialized in wooden bridges. And so we can get experts who can help you and have more knowledge maybe than Caltrans has.
May I try to summarize what I've heard, and you can correct me if I get it wrong? What I heard, the message that comes through very strongly is that you don't feel that this is a full range of study, that you feel to some extent a decision has already been made, and that that decision is to replace the bridge, and that there are other alternatives that you don't feel have been seriously studied, and you're afraid that they won't be seriously studied in this, and you would like to see an analysis of whether you can keep the bridge before a decision is made on whether you're going to build the bridge, and you're not convinced yet. You're not convinced that that is the case, and you're not convinced that this study will reveal all of that information or be open-minded enough to ask those questions. There were several other things that you expressed in there, including, please understand that these range of transportation projects, they all impact these communities. They're all going to come at once. Think about small details like the speed and how people move. There were lots of comments that you have in there, but I felt that the core was, please study the full range of alternatives and show it to us. Don't decide in advance.
So up until October 5th, when you've made your decision, we no longer have any input, we can meet a couple times with you to discuss your design, other than the third option that a lot of us agreed to. But I think she's right in that what I hear from her is that we need to delay, because nobody, I think that anybody that drives that route often knows that it works perfectly fine for us now. And you're talking about around 6 years from now, you're going to start construction, which is going to impact our lives tremendously, okay? And we don't need it. You're planning construction of something this entire community believes we don't need right now. I think that I would move that you delay the project. Just delay it. We're not ready for anything like that.
That comment is noted. You would like to see it delayed. I do want to clarify on the October 5th piece, which is that there was no decision that will be made by October 5th regarding any alternative. By October 5th, this group has to hear from you and everybody else that needs to comment on the scope of the study. What is its purpose, and what is the range of alternatives that, actually it doesn't even, what is the purpose and need? What is the focus of the study? And then they go home and have to do all of the things that, and you're commenting on this right now. You're saying during this scoping phase, don't just do a study that's this wide, we want you to consider these things. You're doing this very thing right now. And it's that period, this scoping period, that will end in October, the official part. But then this team goes home and does a bunch of homework.
And what if we opt that you don't do it right now, that you delay it for 5 years?
Can I
put you guys, you'll find
You know,
something else to do.
Can I
Yes,
say
you've
something?
been very
I've been
patient.
waiting here.
Yes, you have. I'm sorry. Please go ahead.
So, look, first of all, Terry Searles, fully defining myself, I'm on the board of the fire district here. So we've had these discussions more about Albion River Bridge, which, given the ground rules that you laid out at the beginning, are out of bounds. You know, we're talking about Salmon Creek today. We're also saying that, you know, if you're waiting for perfect, meaning we're gonna figure out everything up and down Route 1, we're never gonna get anything done. So this makes, these arguments, I'll be blunt, make no sense. Because if they've decided back over 10 years ago that you need a new bridge, I'm comfortable that we need a new bridge. You know, there's a limited amount of money and a limited amount of time that Caltrans has. We can delay this bridge and they will move on to something else. But beyond that, I think you got to understand the whole CEQA NEPA process allows you to feed in all the time. I ran something on a new production reactor for tritium back in the late 80s. And basically it was the same thing. Department of Energy had 3 different sites, 3 different processes they wanted to do. And plus, you know, Anne-Marie is right. There's always a no action alternative. So effectively you end up doing 10 EISs in my instance. And you're going to look at, I mean, to me it's a bit of a head scratcher. I understand the 4 things here that you're on, and whether or not you can drill down on a preferred span, you know, that gets you around doing that many alternatives. But I think that, you know, as you move forward, you really need to keep your eye on the ball. Frankly, we have a lot of information. There has been a lot of meetings. There will be a lot of more meetings. EIRs and CEQA and NEPA and the EISs that go along with that allow us to take continual bites of the apple. You know, this is not October 5th, you know, we never have another chance. So this makes no sense. So I would say that you can keep proceeding, and you know, if one thing is a no action alternative, then fine. And I should add, you know, I'm a proponent of this, and one of the alternatives means that I lose property because it's my part of what you're going to do on the green route takes property away from me. But it's fine. My view is, and that's why I kind of reacted the way I did, all the community isn't thinking the way you all just said they're thinking. I would like to see a new bridge. And the truth of the matter is you're not going to see a new bridge by 2025 because there's going to be a variety of kabuki you go through. Who knows what recessions, et cetera, that we're going to go through. But you know, if you keep planning, then you can eventually get into this. And the other thing, Anne-Marie, and I really apologize, but I take offense at some of the things you were saying because you actually don't know what you're talking about.
I have to stop you right there.
Okay.
No, I have to stop you right there.
Let me say something about climate change.
Commenting on what other people need
I
or
want to
where
say
they're coming
something
from.
I do work in Asia talking about climate change and greenhouse gases.
I believe you're an
Let that
expert.
man
So
speak, please.
Hold on just a minute. I believe you're an expert, and I'm happy to hear anything that you have to say coming from your point of view. Please let people speak for themselves.
Sure.
Great. Awesome. Please keep going.
No, done.
You sure?
Yep.
Okay.
It's not the Santa Creek Bridge, but I have to ask this question because as I'm driving back and forth every day across the bridge, I'm thinking, okay, you know, there's going to be, I've heard, you know, the bridge should be closed down for geotechnical study, you know, that this, I guess, is coming up soon here on that slope. And so I started thinking, okay, half-hour delay on the bridge, and I started thinking, all of a sudden, I thought of emergency vehicles. I started thinking of fire department, ambulances. Well, we have a narrow little point right there. I just want to ask you, how do you address something like that when you have a backup of traffic? Will, like, the Corps of Engineers put a bridge across the Albion River and a flotation bridge so you can allow vehicles across, or how do you handle that kind of thing,
Well, first of all,
which is going to be a concern to everyone here on the coast here? So,
first of all, it's no more than a 20-minute delay, and we've already coordinated with the Albion River Fire Department for emergency vehicles to have access. Should that be necessary, emergency vehicles will be able to pass immediately. just like to respond to a couple comments that were made earlier by Anne Marie. It's not over 100 trees. It's 90 trees. 65 of those trees are along the Caltrans right of way, and then 35 are selectively identified around bore sites that would be removed. So, you know, again, a lot of this information that's getting passed around the community is inaccurate, and we're more than happy to point you to the staff report, which has the information that I think everyone here needs to take a closer look at.
Well, I'm only concerned that the 1 point question I'm asking is for emergency vehicles and how you handle it. You've talked to, you know, Ted, I mean, I've talked to the group, that's fine, but I just want to know, because 20 minutes could be someone's death. So I'm just saying, I just wanted to know how efficient you know, you're going to deal with this, and so I just have that's just a question, that's all.
Yeah, we've coordinated with Ted,
okay.
Reached out to Ted.
We're content with the answer.
All right.
We've worked out an arrangement so that emergency vehicles will have immediate access across the bridge through traffic that's being held.
That's, you know, it's not about, I mean, I've thought about the taking out of the eucalyptus personally. For me, it's an invasive plant. I really don't care about that, but I was concerned that almost, it seemed immediately, because I haven't been in the dialogue or the conversation, that or by removing it and doing geotechnical work, it seemed to, you know, not factual in my mind, but at the same time I had this impression that it was already being moved ahead, advanced ahead before it was determined whether it was if the EIR was completed already, whether there's other issues going on, and so I had this question like, how can that proceed, an environmental impact report, to do that kind of work, even though it's necessary to do it, so you can determine what you need to do. So how does that somehow proceed? How does the work that's going to come up in a few weeks or a week or whatever proceed environmental impact report? That's what I just wanted to ask.
Well, the geotechnical investigation is required in order to get the information necessary to do a life cycle cost analysis on each of the alternatives, and that includes the rehabilitation alternatives that are being considered for the Albion Bridge.
I understand that, but is there a step process that you would do an impact report first on the site, the habitat and the site first, determine that, and then proceed, once that's determined, what the erosion or whatever the impacts are, once he's determined what that is, then proceed to do that type of study. And it seems that would be the order of business. I'm not saying that it is, I'm just saying that's what it seemed like the proper order.
The environmental studies have been completed for the geotechnical.
Okay, that's what I,
yeah, there's
and that's why I was
projects
asking.
kind of being discussed all at once, and yeah, so each individual action has, you know, CEQA documentation. It might not always be an EIR.
Yeah.
It could be a different type of CEQA document that assesses all those different elements before construction.
Well, that's what I just want to get that
Yes.
sort of lined up to see, you know, how this process is working for myself.
And like the Albion Geotech and the Albion Bridge, you know, separate CEQA document than what we're talking about tonight for Salmon Creek.
So that information is, like you were saying, that
They've gone
contact
through
you and it's available for review, to see the.
Yeah.
Okay, all right, thank you. Sorry to jump to the Albion Bridge.
No, that's fine.
And I just wanted to note quickly on the previous conversation, just to clarify, there is just talk specifically about the Salmon Creek Bridge Replacement Project, there is a no project alternative that will be analyzed. So for all these different environmental categories, we'll look at different replacement alternatives, also look at the no replacement alternative that could certainly be what Caltrans decides is appropriate. I mean, it's still on the board, you know. There's no pre-decision on that.
Well, personally,
I'm not directing that to you.
Personally, historically and how it fits in the community, I love the bridge, and I think that should stay. However, looking at a broader range from different types of impacts, whether it be earthquake, tsunami,
Yeah.
whatever.
Yeah.
The bad turn that you make when you go on the north side, that's a dangerous point over there. It makes
Yeah.
sense to move it on to that point.
Yeah.
But still like to see that it's going in a certain, you know, it's, the process
Stepwise
is.
decision kind of
Yeah,
thing,
okay.
Yeah, tsunami, greenhouse gases, all those are parts, yeah.
Thanks for.
I hope that answers.
letting me-
We have about 20 minutes left. This is a very detailed conversation. This is a good conversation. Please. Yeah, you.
I'm Ted.
Ted,
What,
yeah,
what
sorry.
are the average annual maintenance costs? And if that's increasing, what does the slope look like?
That's for the Salmon Creek Bridge?
Yeah.
Right now, that's sitting at about 250 to 300,000 a year, and it's going up from there. We don't have more recent data because the last time it was painted, I think, was 3 years ago. You know, that's
2013, I think.
So we'll have another project coming up, and I believe last time it was $3.5 to $5 million, but I need to check on that number. I don't have the exact dollar value for the annual maintenance costs. And that doesn't include, of course, you know, the minor rehab work that's done by District Bridge maintenance and also the inspection that takes place.
Anne-Marie.
I wonder about the cost increase. I've just, I haven't looked into Salmon Creek Bridge as much, but as I've looked into the financial estimates that we've gotten. When I first heard about the Albion Bridge, that was maybe around 2009, it was going to be 35 million. In 2013, it was 50 million, and now it will be 91 million. So it's, if we decide as a community that we would like a new Salmon Creek Bridge, for example, and we think, well, it's going to be however many million you tell us, and then over time, it doubles, triples, quadruples, we might not have made that same decision from the get-go. And so I think that's needs to be examined at the same time as we're examining the maintenance cost and seeing how do they relate, these figures?
Well, first of all, Anne-Marie, your facts are inaccurate. The 25 million for the bridge was just for the structure. When you say 90 million, I think you're probably factoring in the support costs, and that's staff time. The 25 million number that you quoted was the actual structures cost, so I think you're mixing and matching structures costs, roadway costs, and also support costs, which is staff time.
I apologize if I don't have it as clear as you have it. It's just often it seems that even if you say 91 million and that's on the shop information, it might be twice as much at the end or more. So,
given the cost estimates that have changed so rapidly in recent years.
Right.
In the trade war?
Yeah.
Right. Wally?
What is the design lifespan of the existing bridge?
For the Salmon Creek Bridge, I believe the service life remaining is anywhere from 10 to 20 years. It's really has more to do with what the sustainable maintenance cost would be versus the comparison to the actual initial investment for a new bridge and the service life on that bridge. So what Caltrans does in the life cycle cost analysis, it looks at what's the ongoing and future maintenance costs for a structure, what's the remaining service life, and where does it make sense to actually put an initial investment out for a new bridge.
Okay, so you have design lifespan. When it was designed and constructed. There's a modest buffer on the end of that from an engineering perspective. Where are we in that lifespan? Because that bridge was about 1955, right?
Yeah, so it's typically 50 to 75 years for a bridge from that era. So we're right now at 45 plus 20, so we're near 65, 70 years.
So in its design lifespan, we've got about 5 years left. You got 4 years to build it. We're close to where we need to be without having the exposure to a fatal consequence of the bridge failure. Kind of makes sense to move forward, doesn't it?
At least do the studies and do a life cycle cost analysis and see where does it make sense? What's the tipping point between continued maintenance on the existing structure based on its remaining service life versus constructing a new bridge, and when that bridge comes online, and what its initial investment is and what its remaining service life would be.
But by statement, wrong bridge for that application. Steel bridge in a salt environment does not have an extended lifespan.
That's
It has a
correct.
shortened lifespan.
Please.
Just wondering how long any of the new bridge will last.
Typically, in this era, 75 years is what is considered the service life for one of these new bridges.
Similar. Please.
Well, I understand that about 80% of the funding for the new bridge comes from the federal government. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And 20 from the state. So if the feds pull out, what happens?
Well, Caltrans continues to cover the cost for the ongoing maintenance for both bridges, and that's 100% borne by the state, whereas a replacement structure, 88% of the funding would come from the federal government, 12% would come from the state.
So I guess my point is that we as taxpayers, Caltrans representing us as taxpayers to get the best bang for the buck from the feds. And if we continue to delay the project, we potentially risk 80% funding from the feds. And in this environment, our political environment, that's risky business, given our present president. And if that bridge fails, you know, all bets are off. It's going to be a whole different ballgame for all the things you're worried about now. And those bridges fall. They have all across the United States.
Walt is next, then I want to check in and make sure.
If cost was not a consequence, if we exceed the lifespan, the design lifespan of that bridge, we have severed access. We have no option but to wait the 2.5 year construction timeline to be able to jump across that, because I don't think you're going to get a temporary bridge across there. So we are condemned to wait that time, or we can plan to accommodate that time while the construction is taking place.
Property owner.
I'd rather plan how deep they're going to stick the knife in than just have them insert it blindly.
Well, the other thing I think that all Albion needs to consider is your home insurance. Your mortgages will fail if you don't have access. And the insurance companies are getting a lot more wiser these days, particularly because of the fires and access. And that bridge, if it gets on your insurance company's radar screen, they can deny you insurance, which means that your loan will be called.
And so I'm recording these, at least in my head, as strong preferences for pay attention to lifespan and safety and the potential economic impacts if we don't get ahead of this.
Right.
Also clearly heard in the room tonight, we're not convinced yet. I think that I'm not sold yet that we need a new bridge. I hope this doesn't sound too naive or Pollyanna. I actually believe this in my heart. It's part of the reason I do this work. I'm moved by NEPA, which is the federal version of CEQA, and CEQA, because it's policy that really requires these agencies to ask the range of questions and then come out and explain their answer. And you don't have to believe them if your trust is low. They have to open the books and show you their analysis and what they came up with. So you don't have to even have trust on the front end. You can see their work and see what they've done and see what they come up with. And tonight's meeting shows the range of ideas, inputs, and preferences that they have to consider in the analysis alongside all of this. Cost, impact, environmental, traffic, the whole shebang. So they're on the hook for a lot. And I think they feel the pressure. This has been a great discussion. We are scheduled for a little bit more time. What else should we talk about? Are there any other questions about the timeline or next steps in this process? Please, Anne Marie.
I would like to bring up what I said earlier again, that we have that second meeting, since it's already planned on the 20th, and that we come back as the whole group on a day before October 5th, and not feel this time pressure of we all have to come up with comments tonight or by the 5th. It just doesn't feel a good way to go about it to me.
We'll see you next week. Thank you very much for coming. I know it's a big deal to come out of your lives, drive up this beautiful ridge, and spend a couple hours of your night at this meeting, including next week again. So thank you for coming. Anything that the project team or anybody would like to say in closing from Caltrans or anybody else? I want to thank Caltrans for being here to answer these questions, and the project team. Anything in closing?
No, just thank you for coming. And the information for both the Salmon Creek Bridge and the Albion River Bridge are available online on the Caltrans project webpage.
Shoot. And I was trying to back up to the comment page that showed all the different ways to comment, but it's on those sheets. And we've got them over here.
Oh, it's back.
Thank you for coming.